Welcome back to Moonlight Lore, everyone. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Hopkins. And in this Part 4 episode, we are finally coming to an end with this topic, focusing on the Lost Lemon Gold Mine that's said to be hiding in the Rocky Mountains of Canada. And before we start off this episode, for those who haven't listened to the first 3, consider listening to those ones first, as they shed some light on the legend, as well as include first-hand accounts from those who had come into contact with the gold, and possible locations on where it could be found. So, without further ado, let's get into the final episode of this series on the Lost Lemon Gold Mine. So where we left off last time, we had just covered tales from the local Native American populations regarding the lost gold here in my home province of Alberta. In the last episode, we attempted to track down the location of the mine by following the trail Bob Canton pointed out in his interview. He and his friends were on the trail of the Lost Lemon Mine, possibly hiding west of Red Lodge Provincial Park, and they weren't the only ones who thought they were getting close to finding it. King Bearspaw, the grandson of Chief Jacobs Bearspaw, who was responsible for hiding the grave of Blackjack, one of the two of who discovered the mine, had spent nearly the entirety of his adult life searching for the lost mine. Now, unfortunately, no news from either men finding the mine came up, leaving the mystery still out there. To this day, people have still scoured the mountain ranges, staking claims and excavating, but never locating the mine itself or recovering the gold. That is until 2005, when just north of Crow's Nest Pass, in a small mountain stream named Spears Creek, did a small team of dedicated treasure hunters come across remnants of copper, silver, and gold flowing down the stream. This report comes to us from Robert L. Lossie in his assessment report about the Lost Lemon Mine project, a project that was characterized as an attempt to preserve historical resource for Alberta and specific shareholder groups. According to testimonies given by Blackfoot elders, the location of the treasure featured hot springs nearby, which served them and their people as a form of recreational activity as well as a place of gathering. Back in 1910, the elders of the time did in fact confirm the existence of gold nuggets the size of a man's fist being present in their valley. Although, on the map Lafayette French had, and according to the story, the location of the gold was supposed to be located near streams that forked into 3 paths. And here in this canyon, there are no free-flowing rivers anywhere, at least according to the report. But one thing it did mention was that these Blackfoot elders did say that there indeed used to be rivers flowing through before white men had come along and buried the rivers in a landslide in order to hide the location. And so upon revealing some small streams and finding gold, silver, and copper, this small canyon near Spears Creek became ground zero for a team to begin their search. Upon discovering the trace amounts of valuable minerals in the small streams, the team went to work to excavate the site and survey other locations for a number of days, with about 20 people in their group exploring the area. Thanks to modern technology, and more precisely Google Earth, the team ended up finding a certain canyon within the bowel of Spears Creek had no streams which flowed directly to the main body of water there, meaning those small creeks and streams they had found minerals in were coming from somewhere else and flowing towards a different location. It had been theorized, and then later confirmed, because the streams had been covered up by rocks and the like, it had caused the water to build up over the course of 100 years and to apply enough pressure to force its way through the obstacles. But in doing so, the forest and foliage had already blanketed the area the stream used to run, meaning the stream would then have to flow under the forest floor between the rocks, moss, and dirt. This was then confirmed after 2 more expeditions by the team that it was indeed true the water flowed just under the surface, and that someone or a group of people did indeed come to the valley in the past and tried to cover up the stream's location. Since this major discovery, I haven't necessarily found much information on whether or not the group had returned to the site for more excavating, but stated in their report that they wished to do so. They had asked for the customary fees per acre would be waived off to allow them further study and to avoid the risk of causing environmental damage to the canyon or stream. It was clear though they believed the gold was somewhere nearby, and in fact belonged to all of Albertans as a natural and historical significant find. With the location of the mine seemingly being narrowed down by treasure hunting enthusiasts, it will only be a matter of time before we possibly start seeing some evidence of large amounts of gold being found. However, the Canadian Rocky Mountains are a big area to cover, not to mention how difficult they are to traverse with equipment. It could still be several decades before anything turns up, and even then, it's quite possible the treasure could not live up to the value talked about in the stories. As we know from the previous episodes, the stories surrounding the mine are often exaggerated and constantly contradicting each other. So while this is the case, perhaps the gold and the value of it was exaggerated as well. What seems to be mainly the case, most gold recovered from Alberta are normally relatively small flakes with hardly anything substantial being found. With most gold being found in the North Saskatchewan River, the same location Lemon and Blackjack had left because of how little they were finding. In fact, most major gold rushes throughout Alberta's history have hardly turned up even a fraction of what the Lost Lemon mine is said to be worth. Now sure, there have been a few success stories here and there dotted throughout time in the province, but they are far and in between and don't necessarily inspire great hope when people take up the hobby of gold hunting. Most of those who take up the hobby are usually granted the same amount of luck those in the past were granted, which was very little. For those in Alberta, finding enough gold to make it rich seems like a daunting task, as much of the gold found is in small amounts, aside, of course, from the Lost Lemon gold mine. Luckily, we know the Lemon gold has been narrowed down a bit and has to be found somewhere in their eastern Rocky Mountains, and more specifically, more likely to be found in the Crow's Nest Formation, also known as the Crow's Nest Volcanics. The Crow's Nest Volcanics is a formation consisting mostly of pyroclastic rocks that were laid down in a series of violent explosive eruptions about 100 million years ago, bringing up precious metals from the earth such as copper and iron. Once in a while, these ancient and dried lava flows not only will produce copper and iron, but also hold traces amounts of gold brought up from deep within the earth. This gold, however, is nowhere near concentrated enough to be found by simply mining. The gold in this state is so small and so far apart, it would all seem invisible to the naked eye. Now, during a volcanic eruption, there is quite a bit of water released in the form of gas clouds. This is known as steam. If the water is hot enough and just acidic enough, mixed in with the rocks and other minerals cooking in the active magma, it can create and form solutions of gold. Obviously, while the gold is flowing through the lava, it will be impossible to retrieve or even see it, which means searching for old deposits of gold away from the original eruption and in the now dormant and very much dried rocks could potentially prove fruitful. Only problem with this is the Lost Lemon gold is believed to be hiding somewhere in one of these dried, dormant lava rivers, and the Crow's Nest Volcanic Formation spans across an area of roughly 1,800 square kilometers. And considering it spans across some of the most difficult terrain to traverse in the country, it seems the gold has always been destined to remain lost. As we know, however, this has not deterred people from searching for it in the past and in the present day. But this theory that the lemon gold coming from ancient lava flows seems just a little off to me. I personally don't believe Lemon and Blackjack would have been so lucky to have simply stumbled across an ancient deposit of gold, which turned out to be so massive it would be one of the most valuable finds ever recorded in Canada. There have been ideas floating around for the past several years that the gold Lemon and Blackjack were in possession of was not entirely found through lawful and legitimate means. The legs on which this theory stands is that Lemon and Blackjack had never actually found a location or dug a hidden mine where they excavated the gold, but rather the entirety of the legend surrounds instances of theft and the stories of the Wild West desperados who committed these crimes. There are many who believe Lemon and Blackjack not only did not find a mine full of treasure and fortune, but rather robbed, stole, and murdered innocent, hard-working miners and travelers for their hard-earned treasure. Of course, as we know from a multitude of stories surrounding Lemon and Blackjack, they were in fact hired and employed as prospectors and were quite well known to be some of the best ones out there. So for this theory to work, these two men would have had to play the part of being the honest, hard-working prospectors, while also robbing and killing those they would run into while out on the road to amass a fortune large enough for the legend to have grown as large as it did. To me, this also seems unlikely, but it has been brought up many times before. Quite honestly though, this has about the same amount of chance of being true as much as the chance of stumbling across such an incredibly large deposit of gold is true. And with so many different stories circulating throughout history of the origin of the gold, one can never truly be sure if certain parts of each story has some weight to them. But there are also those who claim that they have reason to believe Lemon was in fact an outlaw at the time, and the goods he obtained were less than legitimate. Chief Sitting Eagle of the Stoney Nakoda tribe from Morley had a few suspicions Lemon was less than honest when it came to his dealings. Chief Sitting Eagle firmly believed Lemon and his partner were outlaws from the East Kootenay region of British Columbia, who traveled west through the mountains robbing and taking lone travelers' gold and money. He also believed that Chief Bearspaw had suspicions of them too. While dealing with Chief Bearspaw and his tribe by exchanging horses for gold, Lemon insisted that he had found the gold in a mine he had dug himself, though the members of the tribe recognized the gold as being nuggets found by nearby placer deposits. They believed if Lemon was willing to lie about where he obtained the gold, he could lie about other things as well, such as how he was able to obtain the gold, perhaps not by mining but rather robbing. Considering Lemon and his partner had crossed through the mountains during the winter to get to them, hard rock mining and placer mining would have been incredibly difficult and more than not likely. Plus, Chief Bearspaw had no knowledge of gold being on the eastern side of the Rockies, indicating to him that Lemon and his partner would have had to either found the gold somewhere in British Columbia and had traveled through the winter to barter it for no reason, or they had left British Columbia with no gold and happened to have come across some in the mountains somehow. Personally, I would be skeptical of Lemon's word that he had found the gold while digging in the hard frozen rock and dirt in the mountains, or finding it by placer mining in the frozen icy water. It just doesn't make sense why anyone would do that at that time of year, so the probability of Lemon and his partner being bandits and having stolen the gold seems much more likely. For all of history, gold has always done funny things to the minds of those who seek it. Ever since its supposed discovery, the lost lemon gold has seen the demise and frustration from nearly every person who seeks it out. And although some believe we are close to finally discovering its lost location, I personally believe it will remain lost for quite a long while yet. Now, just because there's a lot of doubt and mystery surrounding the lemon mine, time and time again we see people with faith and desperation fueling their searches in order to make it rich. It's true here with the lemon mine as much as it's been true for the Oak Island treasure on the other side of the country. And just as confusing as the story behind the Oak Island treasure is, the lost lemon treasure is just as difficult to follow, if not more. Forts and landmarks are quite literally no longer on the map, and supposed eyewitness accounts contradict other eyewitness accounts, and quite simply put, we have very few facts supporting the legitimacy of a lot of rumors and claims. Ron Stewart, the author of The Lost Lemon Mine, an unsolved mystery of the Old West, and the main source of information for this whole series, has written in his book that he believes the total value of gold exceeds several $billion worth, and that it's only a matter of time before somebody eventually discovers its location. There are those who think the lost lemon gold is nothing more than just another simple urban legend lacking substantial evidence of its existence, and there are those who still cling to the hope that one day they will be the ones to find the lost bounty. It's a dream that has crossed the minds of hundreds of men and women, only to diminish upon the boulders of the Rockies after desperate campaigns turned up nothing. Perhaps the gold has always been destined to remain lost thanks to the supposed curse surrounding it, or perhaps all it will take is time, and the determination of the few who pick it up and have been continuing this search for the past 150 years since its first discovery back in 1870. But until it's confirmed to actually exist, we'll simply have to wait patiently to discover if Lemon and Blackjack's legacy hold true, or if the lost gold had been nothing more than just a rumor of the Old West. Thanks for listening to the Lost Lemon Gold Mine series here on the podcast. Sorry for this episode being a week late, but putting out 4 episodes in a row proved to be pretty time consuming when combined with everyday life. If you're interested in learning or reading more, I highly recommend buying and reading Ron Stewart's short book called The Lost Lemon Mine, an Unsolved Mystery of the Old West. There are plenty of other stories and theories he had written about in his book I had left out here on the podcast, and it's certainly an interesting read if you're interested in learning about it more. I also want to thank my Uncle Greg and my dad for sharing this legend with me. Even though I only live a few hours from where this gold is supposedly located, I had never heard about it until I was given the book by my dad, which I should probably return because he borrowed it from my Uncle Greg. And so Uncle Greg, if you're listening, you can blame my dad for hoarding the book you lent him. But if all of you guys like this series, please consider sharing it with your friends and family if you believe they would also be interested in learning about this legend and other topics I talk about here on the podcast. If you haven't already, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes as well, as it helps the podcast grow and helps draw more people into listening. As always, I'm grateful for all of you listening and thank you for doing so. If you're interested, I occasionally post updates and pictures about episodes on the Instagram, Moonlight Lore Podcast. And if you have a story about the paranormal, a suggestion for future episodes, or simply just want to say hi, you can email me at moonlightlorepodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, everyone, keep your lanterns lit and keep exploring the unknown.